You guys are on. Want to make sure you put your name in the chat box. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we're in week two, and some of the slides this week and the focus is talking about different types of assessment and assessment terminology. So one of the slide decks you'll see for week two, it has two smaller slide decks. I'm going to kind of go over those quickly, and then I'm going to jump over and talk a little bit about the interview project, kind of review it, see if anyone has any questions on it. So when we start looking at testing, we're going to talk about informal. We're going to talk about this course, informal, norm referenced, and CBM. So a lot of the information on the slide decks I'm going to share with you, especially this first one pertains to norm reference testing, more formalized testing, what we get into when we're going to look at doing evaluations to see if students qualify for special services. And so this is basically just some terminology, some things for you to be familiar with. Some of the terms really you would only deal with regularly, have to really be familiar with them as if you decided to go on and get an advanced degree to where you could be a school psychologist or a psychometrist, basically where you're doing all the evaluations and testing. So but we'll go ahead and go over it quickly. And that way, when you do sit in the MEEGS meeting and they're explaining that information, you have some of an idea what they're talking about. So why is assessment important, first of all? I mean, why do we have to do it? So it's important to understand that we must select the right type of assessment. Make sure we understand some of the basic principles of measurement, what it's going to measure, and a little bit about understanding that. A little bit about the administration techniques and a little bit about the scoring procedure. So each of the formalized assessments that we use when we go and evaluate kids, depending on what one it is, whether it's the BAS, the WIS, the Woodcock-Johnson, those are just some of the more popular ones. They all have different scoring criteria and different procedures we have to follow. And so each one of them has its own little quirks about it and methods that we have to follow in order to come up with the overall score. Some different concerns in the just the field of testing in general um, are some of the mistakes that can be made by professionals, right? We're human going in and doing that. And so when we go in and analyze those results, there can be mistakes made. And so some of the common mistakes are you have misidentification of students qualifying for services. Actually, I'm dealing with that right now in our district. Had a discussion with our SPED director this morning. And we inherited a student, moved in from another district, and what a mess. They obviously were misidentified, and so we're having to go through some procedures there to get some of that corrected. Misinterpretation of reported data. Um, Another mistake that's made is choosing poor quality testing instruments or the wrong type of assessment. Um, Using only administration approved instruments. And what that means is mainly only specific tests that maybe the district administration approves. And that can cause a problem because a lot of times they're not skilled or knowledgeable about assessment and what they do and what they're designed to do. And they may just, have specific liking for one and basically dictate that everyone uses it. And that's really not the best practice. So taking recommendations at face value is another one. Okay. So basically trying to gain an understanding. Don't just because an evaluator comes in and they're making specific recommendations, take that as face value. Do a little bit of homework, have some knowledge going in, ask questions. That's why it's important to try to just have a basic understanding of what assessments do and a little bit about the terminology so you kind of understand. Another big mistake is using maybe current, what we call fad instruments is something that's maybe new and on the horizon, and everybody's just really excited to try it, and they just only use that one instrument for evaluation purposes, and they try to qualify as a student. Always say don't rely on one specific test to make a decision on placing a student. Make sure you have multiple data, a lot of different forms of screening and ways that you collect the data before you make that decision. Also, another big kind of a failure is failure to establish effective rapport with the examinee or the student you're going to test. So it's real important when we come in and do this, especially the more formal, try to spend a majority of time at the beginning just trying to develop a rapport. There's nothing probably that will skew a test more is if I come in, I don't develop that rapport. It's very awkward. It can be intimidating to a student or even the younger student. Here, this stranger's coming in to evaluate them. And if I don't try to warm up to them and get a little rapport going, it definitely can affect some of the outcome of the results. So here's another big one. Sometimes we get into is failure to adhere to the administration rules. Okay, so basically what that means is we have a strict protocol on these formalized assessments that we have to follow. And if someone comes in basically and they want to start taking shortcuts or just kind of go rogue and start doing their own thing and not follow the specific protocols, it will definitely affect the results. And so one thing I always try to express to people that are thinking about going into testing or that are doing it, just remember you have oftentimes their livelihood as far as their educational experience in your hands. Well, it's very important to make sure you follow those rules. Be very careful in the scoring and interpreting the results. And also be really careful when you make recommendations to the team to consider, whether it be placement or additional interventions. Okay, because once that student is categorized and that label is there, it will follow that student for a long time. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about some terms. Okay, just some different terms that you might hear. So we look at raw score, and that's basically what we're going to depend on when we do the informal assessment. It's just strictly looking at a raw score. And so basically we are just taking the overall total number of items or questions on that assessment, and then we're going to subtract the number of items that were missed, not items that were presented. Okay, so that's what we come up with a raw score. So we take the number of items missed from the overall total number there, and that's what we get, what we call the derived or the raw score. The next term is norm referenced. Okay, these are formalized assessments. Oftentimes you have to have extra credentials, certifications to administer those. And when we say norm reference, that's a big national sample of students who are the same age and grade who attempted the same items. And so if I have a fourth grade student, and it's the third month of school, and when we go to norm that, it's going to be compared against students who were fourth grade, third month that attempted the same items, and it's going to compare that student's scores to that large group. So that's what norm reference means. Next thing, and this is really not as important for you to be familiar with, but just something that you might hear is we talk about different numerical scales. We have a nominal scale, and that's used for identifying the purposes only. Number functions like the name, like an ID number. Numbers cannot be used in mathematical operations. Okay. And we have an ordinal scale, and that's usually when we rank order items from first place, second place, third. Okay. Or greater quality to a lesser quality. All right. A couple other scales that we deal with on formalized tests are interval scales. Okay, and those are again used to identify rank from greater to lesser. Okay, numbers are equidistant, meaning like degrees on a thermometer. That's kind of an example. Okay, again, not used for mathematical operation. Ratio scale use direct comparisons and mathematical manipulations. Okay, they have a true meaning of absolute zero. Then we have some what we call descriptive statistics. Okay, when we get into formalized testing, especially the norm reference, a lot of it is dealing with statistical information. Okay, a lot of statistics. And we take and analyze those statistics to determine if students qualify. So some of the basic terms when we talk about scores, um, obviously the raw score is they've got maybe 23 out of 30 correct. Okay, that's a raw score. Then we would have what we use in terms of percentile rank. Okay, so they scored the 72nd percentile. That basically means that that student scored equal to, if not better than, 72% of the students in the norm group that took that test. Okay, that's what that means basically when you hear percentile rank. Standard score, that's what we use when we look at a bell curve scale, their standard score. And then we go and look at a bell curve and it shows us where they fall, and then we come up with the overall percentile rank. Grade equivalency is one that you probably will see on different types of assessment, maybe some that your district uses. I don't know how many of you are familiar with STAR score or STAR testing, STAR reading, STAR math. Okay. Oftentimes they'll present those scores in grade equivalencies or age equivalencies. So, for example, Rosemary, you may be teaching fourth grade, so we're in the fourth grade, third month. Your little Johnny took the STAR reading test. Basically, it's a benchmark diagnostic quick screener that we can use. And your little Johnny scored eighth grade, third month. That was his grade equivalency. So he scored well above where he is actually placed right now in the fourth grade, third month. So that's what we call a grade equivalent score, eighth grade, third month. Okay. Or eighth grade, fourth month, whatever it may be. That tells us that he scored significantly above his grade level where he's expected to score. Okay. Another score that you often will see on formalized assessments when they come in to present scores in the meeting to give you the results are age equivalent scores. Age equivalent scores. So again, Rosemary, your fourth grader that was tested this week, he might be 9 years and 6 months, the day of the test. That was his actual chronological age. On that subtest that I gave him, comes back and he scored 13 years, 2 months. That's his age equivalent score. So again, he scored well above what his age equivalency is expected. Okay. So that tells us he's scoring well above what's expected for his age. Okay. So those are two easy ways to look and see how a student's doing. Then percentile rank, if you see Johnny scored again in the 72nd percentile, okay, it tells us he did as well, if not better than 72% of students taking that same exact test. All right. Measure of central tendency, it's a way we organize data, cluster it together, and then look to see how it's distributed. And it's done with an average score. We talk about a normal distribution. It represents the way test scores would fall if a test was given to every single student of the same grade in the very same population. So again, it's just a different way to present scores. It's also a different way to show how other students in that norm group would score. Okay? Here are some other just basic terms. Median, mean, mode. Does those sound familiar to you when you talk about scores? Okay? So median, if we're talking about a series or a data set of scores, we've been collecting data on a student. We've got some raw data scores, some numbers, and we're going to try to figure out what the median was. So we're going to rank order that data set by writing each score the number of times that it occurs. And basically you're going to count halfway down the list. 50% of the data are listed above the median and 50% are listed below it. So we'll look at a data set, a set of scores, and we'll find that midpoint of the list, and that will give us our median score. Next, we're looking at averages. Mode is a number or the score that occurs the most number of times. Okay, so if we look at a big data set and we're trying to figure out what the mode is, basically we're looking to see what score in that data had occurred the most number of times. The distribution won't really get into that because that's really geared toward if you are going to be looking at doing psychometry or school psych, where you really have to dive into a lot of the terminology. So really it doesn't pertain to this course, but here are some examples looking at the median. Here we have the data set. We count up the number of scores. We find what is exactly in the middle, and then we do our calculations. So the median would be a 78 on this particular set. Okay. Same thing over here. We're going to find that middle score in this data set. You can see with the data that's given in this particular set, we go through our calculation, and your median number occurs right in the middle. It's going to be 84 on that set. Mean, just simply a different mathematical term for average. Okay, we're going to find out what the simple average was. Okay, so if we have a data set for the example that's given there, you can see various scores ranging anywhere from 90, 80, 75, 60, 70, 65, 80, 180, and 80. You're going to total those. There are 10 total items on that, right? So we totaled up, divided by 10. So our mean, or the average, is going to be a 78 in that data set. Okay. His high score was a 100 and the low score was a 65. And we have, or I'm sorry, a 60. And then we've got several scores in between. You can see the student scored 80, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Okay. So we have kind of a wide range, but to get the average, we'll add them all and divide it by 10, because there was 10 scores listed, comes up with our average. Okay. Here we talk a little bit about variability is a way that scores in a set of data are spread apart. Okay. Again, we have some variations on this data set up here that I just gave you. I mentioned 100 was a high, 60 was a low, and several in between. So we've got some variability in our scores. Okay, we don't see a lot of them clumped together really close, like between 100 and 85. Okay, we have a little bit of a wide range. And then we talk about range. Okay, it gives us an idea of the spread. So the range on the data set I just showed you, the range was from 60 all the way to 100. So our top score for the example I gave you was 100. The low score was 60. Here they're giving us a different example. The top score was 100. The low was 45. So we subtract 45 from 100 and it gives us a range of 55. Okay, pretty simple basic math on that. Standard deviation, want to talk briefly about it. So this is when we're going to be looking at like a bell curve, and we'll work with a bell curve when we get into norm reference, okay? And you guys might have seen some bell curves if you sit in on meetings when they're going on test results, but 100 is what we call the standard, or the average score, falls right in the middle of a bell curve. And so standard deviation is a method of calculating the difference in scores going upward and backwards. So a lot of times when we talk about standard deviation, the student scored 2 standard deviations above the mean. The mean is 100 on the bell curve. It's right in the middle. Most standard deviations typically are 15 points. So 1 standard deviation above the mean would be 115. 2 standard deviations above would be 130. 1 standard deviation below the mean would be 85. 2 standard deviations below would be 70. Okay, so you can kind of see what we talk about there. So we like for those scores to fall in. Typically, we call the sweet spot when we're testing. We like to see anything from 85 to 115. That's anywhere from the low average range to the high average. Okay, low average is going to be down 85. Average is 100. High average is 115. We really like to see stuff falling in there. If it's higher than 115, it's great. We start getting below 85, that two standard deviations down around that 70 mark, we have red flags popping up. Okay, discrepancies. So it's a little bit about standard deviation. Okay. If it's one standard deviation above or below, that score is considered significant. Okay, especially when they get two below, right? So statistically, guys, just so you kind of know, more than 68% of scores fall within one standard deviation, either above or below the mean. And that's a statistical fact on that. Okay. So a majority of them, 68%, you're going to see fall in there. So you kind of have that expectation going into a MEAGS meeting when they're going to go over scores with you that a substantial amount of them are going to fall in between 85 and 115. Okay. Either one standard deviation below or one above. Okay. When we start getting, this is kind of key right here, and I mentioned this just a while ago, two standard deviations below the mean. And I talked about, hey, red flags are flying up. When we're starting to approach two standard deviations below that mean, that 70 mark, when they're down around 70 and even below that, we're starting to look at someone that's going to be classified with ID, intellectual disability. Okay. Those are pretty significant. So kind of goes along with the comment I said, when we start getting down in that 70 range, down in there, that's when all the red flags pop up. And that's kind of how I go about explaining it when I walk into a MEAGS meeting and go over the test results. Try to tell them, hey, when we start getting down in that area, there's red flags popping up. We need to really pay attention to that. It's telling us something. Okay. Now, the opposite. You could be using one of these formalized assessments, guys, to screen for gifted talented. Okay, a lot of districts do it. So when you're two standard deviations above the mean, so 130 and higher, that's when you start getting into qualifying student for gifted talented. Okay, right. So any of those scores you see 130 and above, those are pretty significant on the high side. Okay. And periodically, you're going to see that. You'll see some students that may score high on certain subtests. Definitely might be their strength. And then on the flip side, you might see another subtest where it's low. Okay. It means they have a gap there, a learning deficiency or a skill deficiency. So it gets interesting once you start looking at all the statistical information and how it falls on one of those scales. Okay. One thing you have to consider, and it appears or seemed like some of the feedback I got from you guys talking about looking at some of your interviews, probably a lot of you don't have a lot of diversity in your districts right now as far as English as second language type deal. But when we run into those types of students, we have to take into consideration some needs that they have for interpreters. If we don't, it is their scores are going to tank. Okay, it's not going to give us a good reading on that, right? Because there's a language barrier for one. Okay, some skewed distributions. You could have small samples or restricted populations are used. That will give you some skewed distributions, skewed results. Extreme scores can change the appearance of a set of scores. So if you have a data set and you have some extremities, maybe some really high and really low, that's going to kind of change the appearance of that data and some of the scores you're going to get. Okay. A couple other types of scores I'm going to talk about quickly are one is a Z-score. Don't know if you've heard of that. If your district uses star reading math, if they use map testing, a lot of districts now are using that for benchmarking. It will provide scores, Z-scores. Okay, and basically it's the mean is expressed as being positive or negative, the standard deviation. Also, we have a T-score. So on T-scores, The number scale is a little bit different. So it has an average of 50 and a standard deviation of 10. So when we get to the norm reference assessment, I have a bell curve template form you can use, and it will provide the ability to give you a T-score. So it has multiple layers on there. It can give you a T-score, a Z-score, and then a standard score. Okay, so each of those have different scales. Standard score, 100 is the mean, the average. T-score, 50 is, and your standard deviation's 10. So he has some differences there. Okay. Stay 9 talks about groups, and you have 5 being the mean. Okay, so you really won't get into a lot of that. So, and also deciles. But I just kind of want to go over a T score and a Z score because you might see them. All right. So that's some of the basic information I wanted to cover for this week on just some testing terminology. Some of those you will hear again in meetings that you sit in, others not so much so. Okay, that's why I didn't spend a lot of time on those. All right. Is there any questions over that information before I jump over and we talk a little bit about our group interview project and kind of how to set it up? And I'll show you an example. I see there's a couple questions in the chat group on it. So, any questions on this before I get off of this screen share and flip up the example report for you? No? Everyone good? Okay. If you have any questions over the information, it's in your course shell for week number 2. Okay, it's a resource there for you. I'm going to get off my screen here and I'm going to pull up the example group interview. On your side, is it showing the report? You should see the abstract page. Okay, I just want to make sure again, sometimes when I flip screens, it won't do it. Okay, this report, this sample is in the course shell. Okay, I'm going to go back to it again real quick so you know where to find it. When you click on module 1 and module 1 expands, it's going to be the first thing you see, and it's going to be right above the week 1 intro to assessment. It's going to be right in the middle. You just click on it. It's an example that's loaded. It's one that was used. I took from way back in 21. I blacked out their names, the group members. This will be the format you'll set this group project up. Okay, again, you're going to be bringing your interview information back to your group, and you guys are going to condense it all down and put it into a report format. So you're really going to have to squeeze the information down. Okay, so there's an abstract on here. It kind of explains a little bit about the interview project. Some things that they asked in the interview, and also basically the purpose of it was to gain information from experienced personnel or that you interviewed. Okay, so here you're going to talk a little bit about the assessments that you learned about from your interviewees. So you're going to combine the information, briefly tell a little bit about each one of them, how you gain the information. You know, 2 of your group members might have done the interviews the week of October the 2nd through the 6th. I'm just using that as an example. 2 group members did it via Zoom. 2 of them did it via email. Okay. Just kind of talk a bit about how you gather the information on the assessments. Okay, also they can kind of conclude in that little intro paragraph, our group used the information gathered to gain more insight on assessment procedures, the type of assessments used, and any special considerations when administering the assessment. Here we're going to talk about the types of assessment that you learned about. So Rosemary, your interviewee that you talked to, they might specifically use the WJ4, and for autism, they might use the SR2 screener and the CARS interview instrument. Okay, they might talk specifically about those, so you would want to include that in here. You can see also in this group, one of the school psychs they interviewed, kind of their go-to was the WJ4 test of cognitive abilities. Okay, so any formalized test that your group learned about, you want to mention it in this section. So you're going to have to really, like I said, condense it down. For here they describe for evaluation purposes, school psychologists may use a formal assessment such as the WJ4 to measure cognitive. Okay. Uh, they also use that for initial eval and reval. They gave some other different assessments that were used for like speech that they discovered amongst their group. For adaptives, they use the BASC, okay, or the ABAS. Those are adaptive behavior scales. Another common one that districts use it would be the Vinland 3. It's very extensive. That might be one. Here they talked a little bit about district-wide assessments for instructional planning, maybe any benchmark assessments, whether it's Star Reading, Star Math, iExcel is another popular benchmarking tool, where they're using the Ames Web, FastBridge, map testing. How many times are they giving it? 3, 4, 5 times a year as benchmarking? Okay, so just give a broad overview of what the information that your group collected on the types of assessment that your interviewees gave you. Here you can see they use the Kaufman um, for a cognitive down here for younger students. Okay, so there's a wide variety um, that can be used. The next section to address, and again, these are the sections straight off of the syllabus where it talks about, hey, talk a little bit about the assessments. Then next section is assessment administration. What is the process required for assessment administration in the districts? Okay. Should be fairly consistent. Some districts might require a lot more interventions before they even get to consent. Okay. That might vary from districts, but the initial process is pretty consistent. Once consent is obtained, you have X number of days. Again, to get that, they have 60 days to complete the evaluation, do the meeting case. So they talk a little bit about it. Then there's an eligibility meeting done. A lot of times that may be done when the MEAGS meeting is going on. The MEAGS is simply when the evaluator comes in, explains the results. Okay. Group might be prepared to go ahead and determine eligibility at that time and go ahead and start developing an IEP to get the student started for services. Okay, here I talked about different ones who can administer assessment. Okay, informals, CBMs can be done by educators, school psychologists, speech, occupational, or physical therapists. Those are all the ones that can give assessments in the districts that this group interviewed. Okay. Paraeducators, they may have some training to administer some different types of formal assessments. Could be to start reading a math. It's pretty much computerized. It's done in a lab setting, same way with map testing. Okay, so sometimes you can have a para do that. Talk a little bit about the initial evaluation process and also about the reeval process and any technological considerations. Okay, and that pretty much finished up that section. The next section going to address your group pertains to legalities working with families and diversity. What are some of the legalities under IDEA law? And this can be obtained out of the Kansas Special Ed Handbook. It specifies requirements for evals and identifying children with disabilities. Okay. So what are some of the legalities that the district has to follow as far as going about obtaining consent, the evaluation process, and then the process on writing the actual IEP? Also, what about anything that the district needs to follow dealing with diversity? Okay. Your student or your district might have some diversity, and they may have to hire um, interpreters to come in and help in the assessment process. That way you get a good, valid, and reliable test result. Okay, so anything here dealing with legalities of IDA law that the district has to follow, here you can also see where they talked about do some parent interviews, talk about concerns they may have for their child. They also get medical history, any mental health history, or other any important information that they may need as part of the testing process. Again, we want to look at the overall whole picture of the child We'll make those decisions. In the conclusion, you look at the assignment rubric in the syllabus. It will have some things for you to address in the conclusion, basically about what your group learned or the team working together, what they learned collectively when it comes to the assessment process and determining eligibility, a little bit about the data that's collected, and then just reflecting on the evaluation process in general that the team learned about. Okay, any specific criteria that an individual district might require as far as sharing the information or making sure the gen ed teachers are aware of it and working well together with other service providers like your OT, PT, speech, all that. So, and then just basically give a little brief overview about what your group learned in general. One thing I think you might find out on this is you'll see a wide range of experience levels within each group. Each group might have someone with as few as 5 years and as many as 30. So you get a wide variety of information back. One thing you want to make sure you do, your group, guys, is make sure that you include your interview information, the questions that you asked, and the feedback that was provided. So each individual member needs to contribute that to the overall document. Okay, so we should have, there's pretty consistent with 4 group members. So we should have 4 sets of interview questions with the results you got or the feedback. Okay, you can see here this particular group, that's what all these additional pages are that I'm scrolling through. It's the assessment or interview questions with the results. Okay. One other thing that is required on there is your basic, just your group contract about, hey, what each member has agreed to do as far as contributing. One member of the group just needs to submit the entire document. All 4 of you don't have to submit it, or 3 if there's a group of 3. Just one person does because you are all linked. You self-enrolled in a group. And so, Erica, if you're the designated person for your group and you submit that project, that interview project for the group, if you have Rosemary and Caitlin in your group, it's automatically going to show that the assignment was submitted and it's linking it to them as well. When I go in and grade it, assign the score goes to each one of you in the grade book. Okay, so it's linked. So only one person needs to submit that. When you get ready to submit it, don't panic if that entire document is 20 25 pages long because you have all the interview questions from each group member and their answers, and you're putting it all in one document together. So it's going to make it fairly long. So don't panic if it's 20 plus pages. That's common. Okay, when you do that. The one thing I want to remind everybody,
All due
excuse
Sunday?
me, do what?
Is it all due this Sunday? Is it all
Sunday at
due
midnight.
this
Yep.
Sunday or just the written part for the interview stuff?
Everything submitted is one document,
Sorry.
one submission on or before midnight Sunday. Okay. All right.
So
Now the
I'm
one,
sorry. So does that mean like the whole the whole paper,
the
like
whole
with
paper.
all the information in it, all the reference and
That's right. It's
everything is
all
due
submitted
Sunday?
all Sunday night.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's what I wanted to make
Now,
sure. I didn't want to
y-
just get, do part of it and then because
no, no, no,
another
no.
one I did
Everything's
part and
due.
then turned in the other part
No,
later.
everything is due Sunday night. Couple things I want to remind you guys about. Okay.
Okay.
Also, each group member will have one thing to submit individually on their own. None of your group members will see it. Okay. I'm the only one that's going to see it. It's that peer rubric where you go in and rate your team members on how well
Okay.
they participated. Okay. So, Erica, again, if
Okay.
you and Rosemary and Caitlin are in a group together, Erica, you might be designated to submit the report. That's your role. Okay. I'm just using that as an
Mm-hmm.
example. But individually, Erica, you're going to submit one document and you're going to go in there and list Rosemary, Caitlin, and you're also going to do a self-evaluation on yourself. Okay, you're going to rate yourself on that. So make sure you include your name, and it gives you it's a Likert scale from 1 to 4, and it's going to give you 5 or 6 items to score them on. Okay, from 1 to 4, 1 being the lowest, 4 being the highest, and you submit it. They don't see it, only I see it. Okay, Rosemary, you'll do the same thing. You'll list yourself, Erica, and Caitlin, and you'll score them based on how you feel they contributed and participated with the group. Then you'll do this, you'll rate yourself as well, and you'll submit that, Rosemary. And then Caitlin will. Okay, so that's the only thing individually you will submit Sunday. Okay, it's one
And we
paper.
put it in APA format, right?
The report, yes.
We put the paper in format.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes. Yes, the paper format. That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah. Again,
Okay.
guys, if you kind of use the format of
Stressing
that
myself.
example
I
that I've
stress
got
myself out
posted,
over stuff.
yeah, if you use that format in there that I've got posted, you'll be fine and just follow that format.
Hmm.
Another thing, as far as
Okay.
collaborating, I mentioned last week, hey, I encouraged you to get signed up. Pretty much everybody got self-enrolled in a group. Okay. And one way to collaborate, I recommended, since this is an online class, one way that you can collaborate and all contribute, you all might be working different schedules. Erica, you might be a night out. You do your stuff from midnight to 2 a.m. Okay. Rosemary she may be an early riser. She does her best work from 5 a.m. in the morning till 7, and she wants to go in there and add to the document. That's why I brought up, hey, create a shared Google Doc, kind of format it, and then you can all go in there
That's
and
what I'm
start
gonna
adding your
do. Yeah.
parts. Yeah,
That's why I wanted to make sure I was doing the
yeah,
whole thing at once and not just parts.
yeah.
Okay. That works.
And
Thank
then
you.
just let every group member know, hey, guys, we need to make sure we've got all of our parts in there so we can do kind of a final review like Sunday afternoon before whoever's going to submit it can submit and make sure everybody's good with how it looks. But that is one good way to complete a group project is if you create that shared Google Doc, and that way you can go in and contribute and do it and be adding stuff. Like I said, everybody's got a different type of schedule they operate on. So that's an easy way to do it. Okay. Any questions over that? Any questions over the group interview project, really? Anything there?
So I had sent you a message. I
So
still have not
that's
heard
what
back
we
for.
have to do this week because they're
Hang on
doing
just
the
a second. I've got two
project,
people going here at the same
right?
time, I think. Rosemary, go
Um,
ahead. You asking a question? No? Okay,
All is
Caitlin.
due Sunday.
I
Everything
still
is
I
have
due
will.
Sunday. Okay, go ahead, Caitlin. Sorry.
I still have not heard back from my group member. I have conducted my interview. I've organized my thoughts,
Okay.
but I've
Did you
not
send
heard
me
back from
a
them.
did you send me a message today? Another one?
No, I have not. I wanted to give that person the
Okay.
opportunity to get a hold of me by this time, and if I
Yeah.
didn't hear back, I wanted to make sure I let you know.
Yeah. Okay. I tell you what, if you have not heard back from them by, see, tomorrow's Thursday.
Hmm.
If you have not heard back by noon tomorrow, you email me, and then I will correspond with you that way and give you direction on what you need to do next. Okay, so if you
Okay.
haven't heard back by noon tomorrow, shoot me an email.
Okay,
Okay.
no
All
problem.
right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Anything else before we go? No? Everyone good? remember where that example is if you need to look at it. If your group comes up against something that you're stumped or struggling with, please email me, let me know, and we'll get back to you and I'll give you some direction on it, okay? All right. You guys have a good rest of the week. Thank you. Have a good one. Take care.